My guest on this episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast is Brittany Hansen. Now, Brittany is a tech entrepreneur with a special interest in marketing, sustainability, strategy, and global responsibility. So these are really hot topics, and we're going to go deep into, is sustainability about saving the planet, or is it more of a political agenda? Hot question, that one. And also what strategies brands can adopt to thrive in this rapidly changing environment. So welcome to the podcast, Brittany.
Thank you, Neil. I am so excited to be here today. And having been a fan of yours, I feel like the fit today is just going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Oh, you're very kind, and that's it's great to hear that. We've certainly connected on a number of different levels, I think, already in terms of kind of being, I guess, sort of like-minded souls. But I'm curious as to whether or not you agree with me that there aren't actually that many of us around. People in tech, people in marketing and communications, people with a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, got to get that word out, but also that are kind of doing this from a responsible, sustainable, kind of ethical standpoint. It feels like those things don't necessarily always sit perfectly together. Would you agree?
I would. I do think it's growing, which is exciting because I think more and more people coming into the field are recognizing that communication is very broken, especially between businesses and consumers right now. But what's difficult is that when businesses spend their marketing dollars, what they're really looking for is an immediate ROI. And that's done in the old ways. It's done with sort of flashbang dynamics and look how exciting this is and look over here instead of over here. And the ROI on transparency is a slow burn. So I think that's why we're seeing that it's a niche thing right now.
And I guess it kind of requires a little bit of confidence that it's the right way to go. I mean, I think, as humans, we know it's the right thing to do. I mean, being a decent, wholesome human being is obviously the right thing to do. But then when we almost put on our hat of, okay, but I'm a professional too, therefore it's almost like you say, a different agenda. It's a bit strange, really, that it is different, isn't it? Because if we're just being good humans, it should be the most natural thing to do, shouldn't it?
I would think so. It's how I feel. But so often, and I'm sure you found this too, as you work with different companies inside marketing, what I have heard over and over again is it's so great that that's a nice thing to do, right? But it's nice. And when it comes down to dollars, I can't do the nice thing to do. I have to do the most important thing, which is to bring money in, which is why I think education around what we're doing is so important because there actually is a great return on sustainable, like minded, transparent thinking. And it is the next wave of innovation that's coming. And as humankind, we need innovation. We need the next frontier. It's what we're looking for.
I mean, I know that you've talked about this a lot, sort of in the past. This whole thing about this political agenda. I mean, it's a real kind of hot topic, both in business, but also, in the political and economic scene. This kind of question mark, and I know, stateside right now that you're dealing with certain kind of high-profile individuals who are questioning. I'm being really kind and less political here, but they're kind of questioning almost the relevance of this whole piece. Whereas I think generally most people would recognize it is a thing. It's a really important thing that we need to be doing for humanity. So before we go kind of deeper into the more tech side of things, what's your kind of current take on whether this is actually gaining traction and it's actually really a thing?
So I believe it is a thing and it has to be a thing, right? Regardless of what you feel the cause is, I don't think anyone can argue that climate change is happening, right? We are aware that it's happening. There's the scientific proof there. There are microplastics in the ocean. There is an epidemic of greenwashing with larger corporations. Those things are happening. I do think the easiest way sometimes for people to battle against something that is scary or new is to turn it into a political agenda. And there is politics behind what's being done. It's why a new president comes in and a large portion of businesses decide that DEI is no longer in their best interest. When companies like Costco are actually coming out and say, not only is it good for our employees and morale and for humanity at large, but it's been great for our ROI. And here's why. Uh, Change is difficult for people. Politics is difficult for people. And the easiest way to make friends is to make a common enemy. I do think that's why politics does what it does. Um, is there a political piece of this? Sure. Anytime you introduce legislation into something, there's something that's political about it. That doesn't detract from the truth that it seems to be the right thing to do, to be good stewards over what we have, to take care of the planet, to take care of other humans, to take care of animals. That's our responsibility. There's no real arguing against that. And we know that. We know that in our souls as humans, that it's our job to take care of others and the planet.
Mm. I mean, certainly in the UK, I think there's a lot of businesses in many different sectors who are almost kind of waiting for, as you talked about, the legislation there, almost kind of waiting for the rules to be set before feeling obliged to do things. So it becomes then almost a necessity rather than it being just the right thing to do. I mean, obviously there are, use cases like, brands like Patagonia who have been very much purpose driven from the outset, where it is all about purpose, and then the profits just kind of follow. They're a secondary thing. But I think for most businesses, and I'm very interested to know your take on sort of tech startups who have that almost that option to go purpose first. But we're kind of, I think a lot of us in the UK, waiting for that regulation in a particular sector or the broader legislation to come in that says you have to do this, because then there is no choice. Are you seeing that in the States? Is there kind of a bit of a difference here?
Of course, and I think that's worldwide. Businesses always start off with innovation and a new idea, and it's something they're excited about. And as they get bigger and there becomes more red tape and innovation becomes more difficult, putting in a new system becomes more expensive, re-educating everyone, all of those kinds of things, we get a lot more concerned about change and how much it's going to cost. So there are a lot of people who wait until it's the rules that I have to do these things. But we're still seeing that innovation in sort of the cool young startup companies, and they're the ones that are setting the trends for that. I cover a lot of luxury in my work, and there's a lot of money there, and there's a lot of cool things being done there. My favorite thing to do is kind of do the Mr. Rogers thing. I don't know if you're familiar with that, where he talked about when he was young having watched news stories, and that it would give him anxiety, and that his mom told him to look for the helpers in news stories. I like to do that same kind of thing with business. I love to find the companies that are trying to change things right now, that are trying to make things better right now. And there's no shortage of them out there. If you go looking, it's there. Even large companies like Lush Cosmetics that makes, bath bombs, they led the market in sort of the glitters inside of their product. They're made out of seaweed or man-made mica, because mined mica causes a whole load of issues. There's no plastics in it. They're doing all of these cool things. There's a company called Kamana that grows mesquite trees, which are good for the environment, and then creates a warm drink out of it. There's so many cool companies. And that's who we have to be watching for. It's not these big companies. They will always shy away from innovation because it's scary to them to have to change everything. That's big, scary. So we have
Mm.
to look to the young ones that are looking for the change and creating it.
So you mentioned, obviously, I know a lot of your work, focuses currently around these sort of luxury brands that you say. Is it kind of almost a prerequisite that you need cash and you need money to be able to do this stuff, or do you think it can kind of almost come from the grassroots up, where actually it isn't about the money, it's more about mindset and vision and strategy, and you can actually do it as a collective of people rather than just have to invest all the time? Or does it require the investment?
Some things require investment. When you're talking about large companies rolling over to new programs, that does require investment. But change does start grassroots. My co founder and I bootstrapped our company in the beginning, and we built it with the understanding that transparency was important, that uh, we started weaving the values very early into what we were going to do and making very purposeful decisions on what we were going to do. Absolutely, there are things you can do that really don't cost you anything. And most of us, I think a good majority of people are know those things already, whether we're doing them or not, right? You can take a reusable bag to the grocery store. You can turn off the water when you brush your teeth. Those kinds of things. Businesses can do the same kinds of things without large amounts of money in the beginning. You don't necessarily have to. And actually, I think the way that so much of this is done right now is the wrong way. Purchasing carbon credits is expensive, right? You don't have to do it that way. You can do other things instead. But for those large corporations, it's easier for them than changing everything. So yeah, it's expensive. We kind of get to choose as human beings between fast and expensive, or slower, more enduring, and maybe a little less expensive in the ways that we're doing things. If it's built the right way from the ground up, you don't have to make the expense later to change those things.
And I know there was something, oh gosh, it must be, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, it could even be longer than that, where there was this kind of almost sort of wave of interest in almost bootstrapping everything, where even if you work for a big kind of multinational corporate, you were kind of encouraged through innovation, or at least as with some innovation programs, to almost consider that bootstrap mindset. And, it wasn't about spending lots of money. It was about, right, what can we do on an absolute bootstrap kind of, either budget or actually no budget, and actually really kind of rethink things. Do you think that's still then appropriate here with this kind of conversation? Because it feels like if you can get the right people into the room, and again, if you're in a very big, sort of well-established organization where it is like trying to turn a super tanker, it's going to take a long, long time to kind of turn things, that actually that bootstrap mindset is a really healthy thing, because little incremental gains feel like they can have a huge value in that kind of model, don't they?
They do. I will use Costco as an example again, just because they're multinational and they're the kind of company that we would typically think of as shying away from something like innovation. But recently in America, they changed the way that they package their roasted chicken in store. Such a small change saved them millions and millions of dollars because of the way that they now package it, and it's more ecologically friendly. That kind of innovation, though, that kind of ability to ask, what are we doing that we could change, requires a creativity that is not always invited into boardrooms. It should be. And there are companies that do. But as consumers, we have a responsibility to vote with our dollars and to try and shop with those companies rather than to do what comes easiest for us, which is I'll do what I've always done, and encourage those companies to do what they have always done. We but that kind of mindset, to what you were talking to, where it's like, what is a small change we can make as a company that would make a big change, is so incredibly important. And there are companies that are doing it. It's exciting, but it's a challenge. If someone came into you today and said, what kind of changes can you make? Our first thought is always, there's nothing I can do that's going to matter. There's millions of cigarette butts going into the ocean every day. There's uh, not everybody can move over to an electric car, and with the amount of electricity that takes, are we really saving anything anyway? And all of these different kinds of things. But ultimately, a lot of little changes actually does make a big difference. And we'll be surprised, I believe, especially in business, when we can make a small change and connect better with our customers, or do something that's better for the planet, and what that means to humanity at large, and what it says about innovation and what we're willing to do. It exists. We just have to be willing to support it.
I think you raised some really, really interesting points there, Brittany, because I think for me, what I've been doing, and you probably will have spotted this actually in some of the previous sort of podcast episodes, is this whole idea of kind of almost challenging the traditional, for those of you who are listening to this, and you'll know the old traditional, old school marketing mix of product, place, I don't know, what was it? I don't know, product, price, promotion. And, there was some really old, archaic kind of P's, as we call them in marketing. And they were really kind of encouraging consumption. I'm really interested in your take on this one, Brittany, in terms of where somebody would start. So let's say they're in a medium-sized business. They're listening to this and they're thinking, hey, these guys are talking some sense. I want to make a go at this. I want to actually see where the improvements could come from. But where to start? So what I would say is, well, there are 3 out of these new 4 kind of P's within this new marketing mix that I'm being sort of, playing around and trying to sort of tease out. And those are product, people, and process. There's another one, profit, which we can come on to in a minute. But just out of those 3, and I'm not putting you on the spot, I promise, but I'm just curious as to your kind of intuitive feel of this, is if somebody in a medium-sized business, let's say they're in a tech business, but it's a medium-sized company, should they start with product? Is it about people, or is it process? Where are they going to see those initial gains to try and build momentum and support within the business, do you think?
So in my mind, and while I'm in tech, I'm in the sort of tech that helps businesses to speak to their consumers. So from my perspective, where it always goes is your communication, right? So it's people. It's it's working with consumers, knowing who you're really targeting, understanding them, and being able to speak to them in the appropriate way. Because there are so many businesses right now who um, even accidentally greenwash because they're not messaging things the correct way, and who have a deep misunderstanding with their customer base, who they are and what they want. That's not going to fly for very much longer. Millennials and Gen Zers have much different buying habits and much different mindsets than anybody who's come before them. They're very purpose driven, and they purchase based on who they share values with. We see it a lot in the luxury sector, but it flies other places too. For um, even in the grocery industry, right? We're seeing that people are maybe willing to have their groceries brought in from there's a Nordic company right now that picks wild berries and will send them to you for all of the antioxidants. People are more willing to spend dollars on those kinds of things now than they ever have been before. If your messaging is incorrect, if you are not transparent about what you're doing, someone is going to find out and share that truth with other people, and it's going to look very, very bad for you when that happens. So in my opinion, it's always with people, it's always with your messaging. That can be scary for companies because most of us know that on the scale from brown to green, most of us are not here. We're somewhere in between. Sharing that information means that we trust our consumer to say, I see that you're making an effort. I choose to reward that in hopes that you will continue to make more and more efforts. That's where we then start to change the product because we have the attention of our customer, we understand them, and we know now how to change our product. Otherwise, without that connection first, you're making changes, you're taking shots in the dark at what they're looking for, which means you will get no ROI, that profit, right? Because you did this the wrong way. You don't know how to change your processes or your product until you've gotten in touch with people and how they work with what you have.
I'm so glad you then segued perfectly into product there, because I was just thinking with this kind of almost evidence and proof that, having got the messaging right, then you've got to substantiate it with the evidence that says, we can actually prove it because look what we've done with the product. So we're not just talking a good story, we're actually showing and showcasing, and actually you're buying from us this new kind of repurposed or repackaged or repositioned product, or I guess value, because it might not be the old product that they used to buy from you. It could be something completely different, couldn't it? Because this whole thing opens up the chance to pivot to new things, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Everything from taking dyes out of foods or fragrances out of soaps to less plastic in our packaging, or moving to cardboard, or where our product is produced, and if what's happening is ethical, or you know all of these things. There's so much out there, and there's so many ways a company can pivot, that connecting with their customer base first to find out what makes the biggest difference actually makes a lot of sense. And they'll tell us.
And there's almost something in this then that, I mean, for some old school kind of marketers or business owners, they will call this market research. And okay, that's fine. It's kind of what it is. But then we've actually got to properly listen, not just do the research, not have those conversations and then say, well, okay, we've done that, but we're going to carry on doing what we've always done. There's got to be this openness to want to change, hasn't there? Because I think for a lot of businesses, there's still that resistance because the perception is, oh, but look, there's a big change there. That's going to cost us. It's going to cost us in time and resources and maybe budget as well. You've got to want to go on this journey, haven't you? Because once you open this Pandora's box, there could be opportunity, but there could also be threat there. You've got to be, welcoming of change, haven't you?
It's true. That's the innovation piece that we talked about a little bit earlier. You actually have to be hungry for it. There is no shortage of companies, and we know some of the big ones, right? Who said there's a story that goes along with the chicken that you're buying, right? And here was its name, and here's the way it lived. And then as we delve a little deeper into it, we find out that was just really great marketing storytelling. Those chickens didn't live a better life than any other chicken. It wasn't easier on the planet than any other chicken. And that's where they did the market research and then didn't change their product. They just changed their messaging. Those are empty promises. And that's why communication is broken between businesses and consumers right now. So it has to be woven into the mindset of who you are as a company, the understanding that we've done things potentially even wrong, or at least uninformed in the past, and we really want to make a change now. That is part of the mindset that has to happen.
And it's a clarity, isn't it? There's a real kind of clarity of, well, both purpose, but also of internal messaging. When you're talking then to, colleagues or to your management team or through, the business, there's a real consistency then of message, isn't there? Because it kind of almost bonds everybody. There isn't just like this one or two in the crack team of innovators who are kind of talking about that and making it happen, but the rest of the business is still doing what they've always done. This kind of it's all about bonding everybody. Again, I suppose it comes full circle back to the people, isn't it? Because it's internal as well as the customer.
Mm-hmm. And you bring up a good point when you talk about internal, because internal marketing is important for these big companies. You do need all of the minds on it. What if someone in your mailroom has a really great idea about how you could eliminate waste, but you didn't hear about it because you didn't educate them properly, and because the process inside your company was such that no one from the mailroom was ever going to talk to anybody who could make a difference within the business, right? Those are the things that are woven into the fibers of your business that will change the way it's done.
And again, of course, that third P that I mentioned in the list of the three of the four was process. And I suppose in lots of ways, for some people, that can be the easy starting point. I'm totally with you on the people one. I think it's great to start there because then you can get the conversations going. But if you're a very kind of process-driven organization, and maybe it is about being part of a much broader supply chain or value chain, so it's almost like you're one cog in a very complex wheel, then process could, in theory, be a starting point, because that could be where you're going to see some significant quick wins. Maybe there is that example that you just gave there. But again, from a tech perspective, for me, that's where efficiency and scalability, those two ends of the spectrum, come into play. Because if you can work out something and you think, right, we're actually onto something here, this is good, we've got this new product, everybody's bought into it, customers wanted it because they told us about it, now we can scale. So then the tech then comes in and your processes can be super efficient. So would you kind of put that one third on the list in terms of priority?
It's hard because you bring up a good point. Things do I always the reason I said people first is because there's that education piece and that you really have to adopt it right into what you're doing. Process almost starts second because that's what creates this really beautiful loop of this is our mindset, here's how we're going to execute it, and here's how we're going to put in the new innovation. And then if you're doing it right, that becomes a cycle where new innovation is always being delivered, it's always being adopted when it's good, and it invites new innovation, which makes things even bigger and better. So you might go people, process, and product, then product as sort of the final piece. And the other part about that for those who are extremely business minded is it gives you the opportunity to see the ROI at each of those steps before you take that final step, which is product. Because changing your product is likely to be the most expensive thing you'll do.
And again, there's this real kind of commercial sensibility coming through in everything that you're talking about, Brittany, here, because I can just sort of sense that, you've been there, seen it, done it, because you constantly come back to this kind of ROI or value of doing this stuff. And it's so essential, isn't it? Because otherwise it's just a pipe dream. We're just all hopeful it's going to be a nice thing to do. Like it's a like, as opposed to an absolute necessity. But if we can marry the whole sustainable, responsible thing with the commercial value, and there is the ROI, then we've got this kind of real sweet spot in the middle, haven't we? The two things have to work hand in hand, don't they?
Unfortunately, they do. And I say unfortunately because as humans, we do want to believe we do the right things for the right reasons. And I think individually, most humans do that. I think collectively, we struggle to do that because, especially in business, and some of that is because there's so much consideration in business, right? If I make a pivot and 30,000 people lose their jobs, then how much good did I really do, right? Is there corporate drive behind some of that and an over concern about capitalism? Yeah, there is. Um, when we first got started in our business, we actually got involved very altruistically because we were like, we are going to change communication by making all information available to people in all of the languages immediately on their phone. We took that idea to so many businesses who said, cool idea. Come back and talk to us when you can tell me how much more money that's going to make me. It was very defeating in the beginning to be like, no one can make a good choice without the best information. How are you making sure people have the best information? And when it came down to it, so many corporations told us, uh, we kind of, I mean, we kind of care, but not enough that we're willing to make any change, even if it's minuscule, because change is so scary. So what we learned to do is tie the ROI in so that people could see it's not just the right thing for humanity, it's the right thing for your business. Should we be doing things simply because it's the right thing for humanity? Yeah, of course we should. Of course I should be doing those things. But I've found as we worked with businesses that the real power piece is being able to say it's the right thing on every level. It's the right thing for humanity. It's also the right thing for your business. Um, it's a hard way to do things. And I still love my favorite businesses that we've ever worked with are the ones who do the right thing simply because it's the right thing. And I will tell you, Neil, those companies have seen bigger returns from us than any other companies because they were innovative enough to start something for the right reasons and then to prove things behind it. We do business with a teeny tiny zoo in a small town in Idaho who does 70% of their animals there are tied to a conservation effort somewhere in the world. They do this tiny little zoo does um, breeding for these released into wild programs and all these kinds of things. They started on with us simply because they said we want to create empathy because we believe that if people understand animals, they will change the way that they're living. They did the right thing for the right reason. What they've then been able to do is to use our software to do studies, which then got them an incredible amount of funding and proved their point that when people have empathy for animals, they change the way they're living. Their ROI in working with us was massive, but they didn't get started with us for that. They got started with us because they wanted to do the right thing for the right reasons. I love that story. It's something I hold close to my heart because there is goodness that's brought into the world simply for the purpose of being good. And whether you call that karma or whatever you want to call it, amazing returns came because of that. That's so special to still have the opportunity to see that in the world and in business. And I think it's rare, but it's still there.
I loving this, and there's such great examples that you're sharing because I think it just shows this can play out in so many different kind of sectors, environments, and styles and sizes as well. That small
Yeah.
zoo there making a fundamental difference, and it just almost kind of gives hope, I guess, to all of us really that this is totally and utterly doable. And I think for me, one of the interesting sort of questions, I guess, which leads on sort of from that is the whole kind of circular model, circular business, circular
Mhm.
economy, where just for those of you listening or watching this who are kind of thinking, what's that? Well, let's just translate it into very simple speak. It's kind of like well, actually, I'm very interested in your view on this one, Brittany, but it's kind of like a subscription style model. So you invest your time and energy into a brand. It doesn't matter kind of what sector, it doesn't matter what kind of product, but you're kind of buying into them as a brand because they give you value, and then you give some kind of return. So it could be cash, could be something else in return for that value. You might actually then trade a product, so it could be a physical product, and when that life of that product is over, you basically send that back in effect to the brand, to the company, and they return value to you again because it's a subscription with a lowercase s sort of model. They return more value to you, and it could be a similar kind of product, but it could be something totally different. And so that cycle continues in a sort of a circular way. You've both bought into each other, you've both got a relationship with each other, you're both winning. The lovely thing for the brand is it's predictable income and value because it's a subscription style model. But the lovely thing for the world and the planet and humanity is that actually things can be brought back to be recycled, to be repurposed, to be broken down and reused. So this circularity thing feels like it's not encouraging consumption, but it's the trading of value, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you see this playing out anywhere? Because I talk a
Yes.
great story theoretically here, and it just feels the right thing, but I'm still failing to see too many examples of it.
It is an emerging thing, and it's a very exciting thing. Again, I work a lot in the luxury sector, and there's actually quite a bit of it there, which has been very cool to see. One of my favorite examples and something that's exciting right now is the concept of the no new clothes movement, which is the idea that instead of just raw textiles being of value, that creativity is of value. So when you're done with your purse, and Coach does this, I know several other companies like this do this, you send the piece back in and they create something new out of it that's one of a kind, that's unique, that's special. And I love this because it puts the creativity back into it. Like an artisan gets this piece and creates something new out of what you had before. We also see it in sort of the idea of rental services where you can rent something, use it until you're kind of bored with it and send it back in. We see it on uh, online places like Poshmark where people can sell their used items and reinvest it in something else, because the idea that when I'm done with something, it's now garbage is a mindset that we're trying to change right now. That's one of the biggest mindsets that can save the planet. I'm done with it, so it's garbage is not true. I'm done with it, so I can give it to someone else who can give it a second life is really about true sustainability. That's the difference between throwing something in a landfill and contributing more to our issues and saying, can someone else find use from this? And that's where really cool creative people get involved and can say, if this used to be a juice pouch, I'm going to make a bag out of it. This used to be, this is someone's terrible old throw from the 1980s. I bet I could make a really cool piece of clothing from this. And we see it on smaller scales inside of our lives. People are learning to compost. People are learning how to um, repurpose old things. I don't know if any of your fans are big Etsy fans. I love to go on and see what somebody has done with old buttons. In fact, the earrings that I'm wearing were Chanel buttons at one point, and they were repurposed into a pair of earrings. I love that. Think of the creativity it takes to put behind that. It did not take extra energy from the planet to make my earrings. It took someone an extra hour and a half to pop earring backs on them. And then for me to buy them and say, I love the innovation behind this. How fun, how different, how cool. I do think that there's still a shortage of it, Neil. So you said, like, we're not seeing it everywhere yet. And that's absolutely true. This is where we get to see the really cool piece of humanity and say, what am I inspired to do about this? What things can I do to change where things currently are? And maybe I'm not an artisan, which I have. I love art. I have my entire life. I do not have the hands of an artist. But maybe I can be creative in something else I'm doing to create a more circular economy. I can invest my time if I don't have money. I can invest my creativity if I don't have it. I can invest in somebody else's idea if I do. And I love what brands have been saying recently. And there's a push even in social media where if someone saves your video now, that's worth as much on the algorithm as someone interacting with it. If you can't invest in a circular economy with your creativity, with your dollars, do so with 30 seconds of your time by finding someone you agree with and saving their video or distributing it. Not everything we do has to cost thousands of dollars or a multitude of our time. You can be clear about where you stand just by what you do with the clicks on your computer. Those things are valuable, maybe more valuable than people think they are, because the algorithm determines a lot of what you see for businesses. So if you tell the algorithm, this is what matters to me, it will pick up on it.
It's exciting, isn't it? Do you feel hopeful for the future? Does it feel positive? Does it feel like we're on the right trajectory?
Most of the time, yes, Neil, and I have to work actively on that. Because I think any of us know as we watch the news, it feels like it could be an awfully dark place right now and that there's not a lot of promise. The more that I stay in this industry, the more incredibly cool people I meet. You're giving a voice to transparency and to sustainability. I love that. Those people are out there. And if we can't greet every day with a little bit of hope, there's really no point. So, do I have hope? Yes, I do. I have 4 children at home. They give me hope for the future. I recently went, my daughter, my oldest daughter, is in debate at her school, and I went and judged for a whole day at her debate tournament. I was blown away by how educated these youth are, how much they understand about our political system, and how dedicated they are to changing and making things better. That gives me so much hope. These are not kids who are sitting on the couch at home and adopting the ideas that they're just seeing on TV. These are children who really research what's happening and have a good idea about how they could change things. And I sat, the very last thing that I sat in on was a panel discussion. So there were 10 of these kids, all who believed differently about what they were trying to accomplish, and all who were able to have a civilized conversation and work towards what they believed could bring some level of unity and some level of change. That's so inspiring. It's there. We just have to encourage it, and which means we have to look actively for it and tell people when they're doing a good job.
Great stuff. Who from listening to this podcast, who would you like to connect with? Who would you invite to click your LinkedIn profile and come and make contact with Brittany? Who would that be? What kind of profile would they have?
I love to make friends with lots of people, but who I'm most interested in having conversations with are people who understand that communication as it is broken and are interested in fixing it. So for me, that maybe looks like people who are part of those new and innovative companies who want to change how they're seen or change how they're doing things. Anybody in marketing, I'm so thrilled to talk to you. Anybody who understands sustainability and wants to change how we're doing things as humankind, I want to talk to you. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to help you spread your message. If I can support you, please reach out to me because I love to support other people who are trying to change things.
Wonderful. And there's an open invitation from Brittany Hansen herself, which is wonderful. So we'll put all the links, obviously that to the business and actually your LinkedIn profile as well. We'll put those in the description below, people. So wherever you're watching or listening to this, you can connect with Brittany with ease, and that's an open invitation to you. And of course, it is all about connection, isn't it? It really is. And we can't do this in little silos. We have to start talking, and that's either with suppliers or resellers or colleagues or customers or even just our friends and family, because good ideas can come from anywhere, can't they?
They can, and they do. I always see that over and over again, but we also have seen that good ideas die if they're not nourished. So we have to find those good ideas and nourish them and share them. What you're doing with your podcast is so amazing. It gives people the opportunity to really speak about what they're doing, and your call for truth and transparency is inspiring. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Brittany. I really, really appreciate it. And as I said right at the start of this, is so good to be talking with a like-minded soul. I mean, we get it. We can kind of almost see it, and it's not that it makes us better people. It's just that the clarity is so obvious, and we just want people to just join this journey together, really, and actually all work together to try and solve this thing. And there's so many different ways it can be solved. So it's been a great conversation. I really, really enjoyed, talking with you today. And as I say, I'll be definitely encouraging everybody to connect with you. So please, if you're just even thinking that it might be worth a connection, go and follow Brittany and watch out for some of the work that she's doing. Brittany Hansen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Neil. It's been a pleasure.